You take about 20,000 breaths every single day. It's so automatic, so fundamental to being alive that we barely ever think about it. But behind that simple rise and fall of your chest is this incredible story of mechanics, of vulnerability, and now of cutting edge technology. So let's take a deep breath together and dive into the amazing journey of how we breathe.
I mean, have you really stopped and thought about it? On the surface, it seems so simple, right? Air in, air out. But it is so much more than that. It's literally the engine of our bodies, and understanding it is the key to understanding our health. So let's start with a really quick but crucial distinction. Okay, so on one side, you've got physiological respiration. That's the physical act, the actual inhaling and exhaling. It's a mechanical process. But on the other side, you have cellular respiration. Now that is the biochemical magic happening deep inside your cells, turning oxygen and glucose into the energy that powers everything you do. For this explainer, we're going to focus on that first one, the amazing mechanics of breathing.
And to do that, we have to look inside the body's incredible air pump, our lungs. This whole process is just a masterpiece of biological engineering, and it all kicks off with one single inhale. So when you breathe in, air enters your nose and mouth, where it gets filtered and warmed up. From there, it travels down your windpipe, the trachea, which then splits into two tubes called bronchi, one for each lung. And these tubes just keep branching out into smaller and smaller airways, kind of like a tree, leading to the most important part of the whole exchange. The final stop on the tour is the alveoli, millions of these tiny balloon-like air sacs. And this is where all the action happens. The walls of these little sacs are incredibly thin. We're talking just 1 cell thick, which allows oxygen to easily pass right into your blood, while the waste product, carbon dioxide, passes out so you can exhale it. So how does that air actually get pulled in and pushed out? Well, it's a really simple, elegant two-step process, and it's all driven by a muscle called the diaphragm. When you inhale, your diaphragm contracts and flattens out, which creates a vacuum that just pulls air into your lungs. And then when you exhale, the diaphragm just relaxes, goes back to its dome shape, and pushes all that air out. It's a process that's both simple and complex, but it's not the same for everyone. And this is where our story takes a really critical turn. Because when it comes to breathing, children are not just scaled-down versions of adults. Their bodies are fundamentally different, and that creates a very unique set of vulnerabilities. The younger the child, the more pronounced these differences are, and understanding them is absolutely essential if we're going to protect their health. Let's break down exactly what makes them so different. First off, their airways are just so much narrower. This means that any little bit of swelling, a tiny foreign object, or even just some mucus can cause a serious obstruction far more easily than in an adult. They also have fewer of those critical air sacs, the alveoli, and they rely almost completely on their diaphragm to breathe, which means they can get tired out much more quickly. And it's not just their lungs. A child's cardiovascular system is playing a completely different game too. To get more blood flowing, an infant's heart can't really pump harder, it can only pump faster. This puts their whole system under a much higher workload right from the start, just to keep up with their high metabolism. So here's the crucial point. Their margin for error is razor thin. For a 5-kilogram child, a blood loss of just 100 milliliters, that's less than half a cup, is a staggering 10% of their total blood volume. This incredible fragility really sets the stage for our next chapter, the dangers they can't even see. Because these beautifully designed but very vulnerable systems have to deal with an invisible threat that is all around us. We're talking about particulate matter, or PM. It's this complex mix of tiny airborne particles that come from things like burning fossil fuels and vehicle emissions, and not all of these particles are created equal. So the bigger coarse particles, we call them PM10, they tend to get caught in your upper airways. But the real danger, the real villain of this story, are the fine particles, or PM2.5. These things are so small, they just bypass the body's natural defenses and travel deep into the smallest airways, a huge risk for those narrow developing systems in children. And they go right into the alveoli, where they can do the most damage. And this quote really drives home just how severe the problem is. According to environmental research, particulate matter is the most dangerous kind of air pollution precisely because it's like a delivery vehicle for so many different toxic substances. So, how can we possibly protect these vulnerable systems from a threat that we can't even see? Well, the answer might just lie in a new frontier of technology, artificial intelligence that can actually hear what we can't.
For centuries, doctors have used a stethoscope to listen to the lungs to diagnose problems. It's a foundational skill, of course, but it's also subjective. The accuracy depends entirely on the doctor's hearing, their experience, and their ability to interpret really subtle sounds. We needed a better, more objective tool.
And here's a look at how this new approach works. It's so cool. This AI model doesn't just listen to a breath sound. It analyzes it in two different ways. It processes the raw sound itself, and it also creates a visual picture of that sound, which is called a spectrogram. By combining these two inputs, it can spot patterns that are literally impossible for the human ear to detect.
And the results are just stunning. This model achieved a 90.3% sensitivity in detecting abnormal respiratory sounds, like crackles and wheezes. That's not just an improvement. It's a massive leap forward in our ability to diagnose disease early and accurately, especially for the most vulnerable patients out there.
So where does this journey from a simple breath all the way to complex AI leave us? What does our respiratory future actually look like?
So, what have we learned today? We've seen that something as simple as taking a breath is actually a marvel of engineering. We've also learned why children are so vulnerable to respiratory problems and how these invisible dangers in the air we breathe can have a huge impact. But most importantly, we've seen how AI is giving us a new kind of superpower, the ability to listen to our own bodies and catch diseases before they become really serious.
And this brings us to a final, really powerful question. As this technology continues to evolve, what other secrets are our bodies going to reveal? What other silent threats will we finally be able to hear and ultimately to heal?